We need to transition our electricity grid, and work needs to happen now. And trillions of dollars in funding will go into building and rebuilding this whole infrastructure, and it's flow to communities, and that's what we're trying to do. Just like flow directly to communities, we go and hire local contractors to do the installations as well.
All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Clean Tech is the Podcast. This is part 2 of our conversation with Fola and Anurag from ElectricFish. We started the conversation with them last week, and we are continuing that conversation today, kind of getting into a little bit more of the technical aspects of their product and what they're doing. So really hope you enjoy today's episode. And as always, this podcast is made possible and sponsored by NextWave Partners. NextWave is a recruitment and talent acquisition and retention agency that supports the climate tech, ESG, and renewable energy spaces globally. So if you or your team are growing, feel free to reach out to them for support there. If you're looking to make a career change, also feel free to reach out to them. You can do so by reaching out to them on their website, next-wavepartners.com. You can also reach out to one of their consultants directly by going to their LinkedIn page, which is in the description, and finding a consultant within your space, within your kind of discipline that might be interesting to you. So thank you so much, NextWave, for helping sponsor this and make this possible. And with that, let us get into the show. All right, and we are back. Part 2, I should say, of this 2-part podcast. Super exciting, and welcome back, everybody. I guess let's just dive right back into where we left off. Wanted to kind of hear your initial thoughts on the landscape of electric vehicle charging, especially you guys were obviously focused on super fast charging, right? So could you just kind of talk to us about the potential for the market? I know there's obviously the bill that just came out recently. I'm curious to understand what's required, in terms of like actually achieving in the US, for example, how many chargers are we going to need to make this actually feasible for everybody to own an electric vehicle, et cetera? So just kind of talk to us about the broader kind of predicaments that we're in.
First of all, I think your first question was around market landscape and potential for fast charging. And I've seen a lot of projections, particularly from NREL, the National Renewable Energy Lab. And really fast charging, especially kind of at the scale which we're doing it, is not going to be the majority of charging in the market. A lot of charging is still going to be like level 1, mostly level 2, home place, workplace. But really, it's been shown, again, the same research, that public fast charging, which probably will be under 10% of charging infrastructure, is really critical to getting to the tipping point of large-scale adoption that we need to be at. And so while it wouldn't be the majority of the market, it is really necessary to get the market to where it needs to be. So that's like one aspect of fast charging, and a lot of funding is going into, sort of incentivizing the deployment of accessible fast charging in many different states. In terms of the infrastructure bill, besides the actual funding that it provides, it really does provide market confidence. And so it's validating for a lot of, folks who are in the space that, okay, the market, the policy, the politics are now favorable towards investment, towards doing work and solutions in this space. And, when federal money goes into any industry, I think it's always great because there's investment in R&D. State money also typically follows. There's grants that go to doing very valuable research, incentives that go out. It doesn't hurt that infrastructure is also being the energy infrastructure is being reinforced right now. Transportation infrastructure, roads are being built. So that's really also really important. I think the Biden administration is doing a lot of work towards getting OEMs also to commit towards electrification of their fleets, as well as a lot of funding towards electric vehicle charging. So all of that is important to getting us to where we need to be. And so even beyond, like I said, the actual dollar amounts that go into these projects, it's great to have confidence going in the market. So with investors going, okay, I'm not going to lose all of my money. It's a little less risk. Let's put money towards this great idea and that great idea. And even if, not all of the great ideas succeed, but the ones that do can be very, very impactful to what's getting us towards where we need to be in terms of tackling climate change.
I can just add that it's very difficult to add direct numbers. There's different predictions. I can talk in percentages more. A big chunk must be home charging, especially to top of your battery. Not everybody will have access to it. People who live in MUDs, multi-unit dwellings, that's a big place. Others in dense urban communities. Even if home charging is going to be a big piece of it, public fast charging must be accessible. So the percentages are thrown in a few hundred thousands to lower millions of fast chargers. The extreme fast chargers should be required, like in next few years, next decade. After that, I guess we need to keep moving. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's quite a lot to deploy in a short period of time. I think that that shows that it's at least very large at the very minimum, right? We can recognize that. I'm curious to know from your perspectives, are there any kind of, when you look at the landscape of the actual materials and the equipment required to build all this technology, again, not just specifically what you guys are doing with ElectricFish, but other electric charging or vehicle charging companies, what does the supply chain look like? Are there big issues that we're running into? I know that supply chain is a topic I think it's talked about a lot right now, with there being shortages of all kinds of things. But when we look at maybe the minerals being mined to build these batteries and to deploy these things, are there any concerns, or like, are there any things being done to help shore up those gaps, to your knowledge?
I'll let AK take the lead on this one. I think you know a lot more about the supply chain, and I can just chime in.
Okay, just supply chain problems on how exactly we build them.
Just the energy storage and batteries generally. Of course, there's always concerns.
Yeah, so we obviously always try to see sustainability as a centerpiece of like in product design. But like there are definitely impact of building a product. Today, while shipping the unit, we had to get a crane which picks up the unit and drops it on the trailer, right? It was a gas guzzler. Doesn't feel good, but you can't find electric big trains right now. I was actually a part of NASDAQ's mentorship program, Mentor Maker program. And as a part of that program, what I did was try to find out all the components and rate them according to what is their sustainability metric, right? How resilient they are, how recyclable they are, even in design. So just distributed the whole supply chain into different categories, how far they are from home. So there's transportation expenses as well. So there are different categories. Still being especially an early stage company, we have to not just think about cost, but also about pace. We need to like airship DC to DC converters from France, and just like needs to be done in a month. Like not that like normal shipping is less carbon intensive. So we thought about that, just tried like figure out best way. Our product development to accelerate this pace, we are generally using subsystem products, right? So we are just getting systems and putting them together and trying to build them from scratch, which gives you more flexibility as well. We take that in mind as a consideration, and that will be basically our KPI as a product development on how exactly we can increase sustainability of the product. But quite hands are tight about thinking about this space. Yeah. Does that talk about the question? Yeah.
Completely agree with Anurag that even as we solve or try to solve these problems, we as an organization are also ourselves very mindful. I'm sorry, I'm just getting a lot of feedback. I'm not quite sure why. Sorry. Okay, so just like Anurag said, I think it's important that even as we try to, address these issues and solve them, that we as an organization are mindful of our own scope 2 and scope 3 emissions. So really intentional about tracking the carbon intensity of the materials that we use. But of course, there's concerns, environmental pollution, emissions, environmental justice, social justice concerns around sort of the mining and extraction, especially of lithium. There's concerns around second use of batteries. There's concerns around proper disposal of batteries. How are we going to get rid of all of that raw material? What happens over time when all of the batteries we're using, even after we use second life, maybe third life, what happens then to all of that material? There are all of those concerns. And it's an ongoing conversation of weighing what can we do now versus what can we do in the future. And there's tremendous research going into how to repurpose the material. So we're very hopeful about sort of where that is going. Our technology also is very capable of, utilizing, sort of providing a second life use. That's not what we're doing right now, but we have had a lot of conversations. And I think we actually initially considered using second life batteries for the packs. And so we are definitely keeping a mindful. Again, remember what I said earlier about being mindful of feedback impacts that we might be having and making sure we're not contributing to the problem. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. There's a couple things you've said that are very exciting generally, with the fact that you are thinking about the entire scope of your emissions. Obviously, I'm not sure if you guys use an ESG tracking platform yet, but I'm assuming that'll be something you'll implement at some point at the very latest. But no, it's just interesting to see that you're thinking about it. There's obviously a lot of potential problems in the supply chain, and it will take time, obviously, for everything. Like, you mentioned the cranes, right? Cranes, there's maybe not a whole bunch of people jumping at making electric cranes, not thinking about it too much, but maybe they will now. Hopefully somebody hears this podcast and knows somebody that can figure this out, right? That's helpful. So, okay. And then we've talked about a little bit about the social aspect with the environment, the mining. I guess I'm kind of curious to, you touched on it earlier, but maybe we could go a little bit in have you seen any direct effect with the infrastructure bill passing recently that's kind of like made an uptick in interest, whether it's specifically for you or for other of your friends in this space? I'm kind of curious to see how quickly this is actually helping to accelerate.
I mean, it's hard to tell what the impact is, because it didn't pass that long ago, but even with the transition between, say, the Trump administration and Biden administration, there definitely was a sort of an uptick in ESG type related investments in climate tech. And so we fully expect that to even improve going forward. I mean, like I mentioned earlier, there's a lot more confidence in this space. And I think that was the expectation after Biden won the election, that this was going to happen. And so even from then, there had been sort of this building confidence and influx of, influx of capital. And as the COP26 just ended, I think the climate conversation is more and more at the forefront of discourse, which is also good. I think more companies and corporations are realizing they need to make commitments. I think because the public opinion is shifting in a way that's forcing the hand of corporations as well. I think it's creating this sort of feedback impact that if they're at least being intentional about reporting on their metrics, what those metrics are and whether it's standardized is a whole other conversation to have. But these are all, I guess, whatever in the right direction. My brain just spaced.
Yeah,
but it's positive for sure, I would say.
Oh, I would like to jump in and also say that towards the startup ecosystem, this is like exciting time right now. We are jumping, right? And obviously there's space investments, so many acquisitions happening in this space, companies being built. So exciting time for sure. Obviously there's a boost So we are enjoying this time, but like there's more to come. Yeah,
got to make sure to catch onto the wave a little bit while it's going for sure, and use that momentum as well. I think that one thing, you know, I sometimes bring up, especially when I talk to venture capitalists on here, is the boom and bust kind of cycle of the economy and everything. Like we had the clean tech 1.0, and a lot of those investments turned out to be nothing, right? Or it took them quite a lot longer, right? People wrote them off as nothing, but it took them a lot longer to have the returns because it wasn't tech companies, right? They're thinking kind of tech company type of return timeframes, which it just takes longer with this, right?
No.
You're looking at the financing model that you're doing, leasing these things, right? This is not a SaaS model where you can just turn up the valve, right? So I think it's that's interesting. I guess I'd be keen to maybe go into a little bit here, kind of your thoughts more broadly speaking on just the climate tech space and energy space in general, and what role regulation you believe should play, how long regulation should stay in place. I know Elon Musk talks a lot about having sunset laws, right? When he talks about colonizing Mars, but just kind of curious to hear your general opinion on that, and where maybe certain areas have been abused in the past or had unintended negative results you think could be improved as well.
Oh boy. Okay. This is a very interesting question. The role of, I think, the public sector and regulation and policies, it's very important. It is very important. I mentioned there's, in almost every aspect of the clean tech conversation, you come across this chicken and egg problem. We need money to figure this out. We need money to scale. We need people to adopt, to prove that there's a market for this. But in order to get there, we need to demonstrate that it can be successful. Which one comes first? So someone needs to sort of put the money in to kick it off. And then everyone's like, oh my God, that works. Let's go for it. Let's do it and get it to that scale that we need to be at. And because this is, overall, we need to reduce emissions. This is a public good conversation at the end of the day. So the role of public funding is really important. Now, to what extent the government needs to interfere is a whole other question. I'm glad you asked that, because at the end of the day, it should be a free market. And the market should be designed in a way that incentivizes innovation and having private enterprise go in and be successful, but making sure that they provide the value that they're providing, that they do it in a way that's positively impactful and not reinforcing already existing sort of discrepancies in the system, doing it equitably is particularly. And so that, again, is another role of regulation. And I think you'll see that in the forms of special regulations made for deploying EV charging or sort of solar storage or distributed energy storage in lower income communities, in the deployment of like charging solutions for multi-unit apartment complexes specifically. But I think there should be a lot more focus and a lot more study into how are these regulations that we're doing really impactful. I think there is a lot of focus on when conversations are had about, discrepancies, there's this focus on economics and income and not enough on race. And when one digs deep, you see that across all income levels, there is always that discrepancy in terms of race. So there needs to be clearly more focus on Black, Indigenous, Latinx communities as well for regulation. Another thing is, I think sometimes there's this weird feedback. I don't know if it's not enough knowledge or representation on the baseline or communication at the grassroots level with these communities. But sometimes regulation is designed in a way that it's not actually really benefiting who it's designed for. One example that comes to mind is, I think perhaps for the EV electric vehicle tax credit that you get, or the rebate that you get when you buy an EV, which is fantastic and did a lot for early adoption in the industry. But but which when one looks at it, it's you get more of a kickback if you're buying something with a bigger battery, which is more expensive, and there for the longest time was nothing, and I'm not even sure if there still is on a federal level or on a state level if you're buying a fairly used car, a used electric vehicle. But who needs the rebate the most? Who needs to be incentivized the most? Because are we trying to just get early adopters who probably can already afford this? Or are we trying to incentivize sort of a more wider adoption to show that this works for everyone? So I think we need to rethink regulatory models and creating impact. But yeah, the role overall of regulators is very important to, like I said, it's a new market. We need to jumpstart the market. We need to think very intentionally about redesigning the system so that we don't have the same problems that we had in a conventional system recurring. So we need to move away from how we've been thinking, right?
Hey, Anurag, did you want to add anything?
No, I was just learning along the Fola's answer.
I think this is actually super interesting because I think, this is something that I could relate to with, for example, my parents are the kind of people who they drive quite a lot, but it's typically a 50 miles, 60 miles to the local city, and then they come back, right? But it's several times a week, right? There's not many long trips that are had, but the adoption of people like that who are not they're not interested in climate tech, right? But they could really benefit from it. I think this is very interesting to point out. Because like you said, it tends to be that everybody thinks that if you own a Tesla, right, it's kind of a sign of wealth essentially, right? So this is very interesting. I'm always fascinated by the regulatory question because I don't think there's ever a great answer. It's one of those situations where you can only hypothesize what's going to happen, right? And even if you track data from what happened in past regulations, that doesn't mean it's going to apply the same now based on the current circumstances. So it's an interesting one. I really would love to see potentially, just maybe a mindset shift in regulatory bodies where it's, hey, let's be more agile, right? Like in a startup, right? Let's create this thing, see how it's working. And then like, if it's not, like we can adjust it. But I think that that goes into the political topic, which is very difficult because there's just not a lot of flexibility there. Let's just put it that way.
Work briefly in the regulatory sort of sector. Things move very slowly. There's so many stakeholders. You have to hear from everyone. It's really slow.
Yeah, I think there was an interesting. If I remember in Tom Rand's book, The Case for Climate Capitalism, he talks a little bit about some ideas where maybe carbon credits could be applied to a fund and then run by a private entity, but kind of government funded. That way, it's venture capitalists who are familiar with the process of turning a profit, but still running a government fund. I think there's lots of interesting things that could happen. I'm always a little bit, I'm very optimistic in general, but I'm not very optimistic that the governments of any sort become very flexible and adjust much, but we'll see how that goes. Any other comments that you guys wanted to make on kind of the larger, more broad landscape of just the EV and energy storage space and the topic of kind of pairing these two together?
I think I'd just say we're probably going to see sort of that integration more and more as we go into the future because, we need a lot of these assets on ground, and there's always thinking about how do we make sure we're getting the most value from this physical asset that we're deploying. How do we get our utilization as high as possible? How do we use that land as efficiently as possible? How do we use every single distributed resource to provide very valuable service to the grid? Because it's a cost issue. It's difficult to build transmission lines. We do need to electrify more. We do need to decarbonize electrification. And so you need all the value that you can extract from the resources that you have. So going into the future, I think we'll see more sort of a smarter grid start to develop. We'll see a lot more interesting sort of energy software develop, sort of more kind of like an Internet of Things over the grid. But there's definitely going to be a lot more integration between those two sectors.
Cool. And like Fola already covered this question, but something which has been just like popping out towards our department as well, and just needing government support and people's perception around if that renewable energy basically takes away jobs or life changes. That's really could not be further from the truth. It's basically you're getting more work done. When we go ahead deploy these units all across different communities, it's just gonna create more jobs, more opportunities, more robust electricity for everybody, right? We need to transition our electricity grid, and that work needs to happen now. And trillions of dollars in funding will go into building and rebuilding this whole infrastructure and as flow to communities. And that's what we're trying to do. Just like flow directly to communities. We go and hire local contractors to do the installations as well. Yeah, so a lot of points there, but yeah.
I mean, that's a perfect that's a perfect segue into the next topic, which is education, right? And talent in general. So I'm keen to maybe hear, I think we should start with maybe your experience with Stanford and the types of people coming there, like what did they have, what kinds of backgrounds did they come from, et cetera. Very keen to just understand, generally speaking, our universities, it sounds like you guys went to obviously a very forward-thinking one. Are universities doing enough to help feed the workforce for these types of jobs and for the future of climate tech?
That's a very interesting question. I should start off by saying I did most of my schooling in Lagos, Nigeria, and I actually got my bachelor's in chemical engineering from the University of Lagos. And there definitely could be a lot more that could happen in specifically integrating sort of this sustainability mindset into the curriculum. I think we've come to a tipping point where, I mean, of course, that's even sort of taking over the conversation a lot these days, but redesigning curriculum, right, for present day, both energy, sustainability, and otherwise. I think we need to move towards really emphasizing the need for not just education, but also re-education of the workforce. And that then devolves into a whole other conversation around like internet access and equity and, you know, sort of how well are you compensating people? Do they get enough time for themselves to, you know, sort of learn new skills? That gets into corporate culture. That's a whole other thing, like I said. But I do think we can and should be doing way more. And there should also be this, we should move away from this perception that we need brand name, big Ivy League, fancy schools to get quality talent. I go to school and work with the most amazing people, some of the most brilliant minds in the world, I can say. But I have also worked with very amazing, very brilliant people who are not at Stanford. And I know a lot who are probably almost certainly smarter than I am who aren't here. And so far, and Anurag can attest to this, I think we work with a lot of interns, and because of this sort of work from home format that we have, and remote job opportunities, we have people who are, you know, sort of college students, or like, oh, hey, I think I really want to learn. Can I just shadow you guys for like a month or two? And these are brilliant people, you know, just scattered all over the world. And even working with folks from everywhere gives you an interesting perspective, right? Because you broaden your perspective on aspects that you might be blind to, conversations that you've never had that you're now having, learning about new markets, learning about someone who lives a different experience from you, interacts with your idea and interacts with your product, which is important to building a resilient product. Is if you're trying to solve a problem for a person, how do you do that if you can't understand the person's experience? So I think we need to definitely, again, focus on re-education, investing in that aspect of things. There is a genuine concern about jobs on net, when you look at it on average, there's more jobs being created by the clean energy economy than there are being taken away. But, delving deeper, it is real people. Those who are losing their jobs, though, or might be losing their jobs, they are real people with real lives, and it does impact lives. And so focusing again on re-education is very important. It is possible to have a transition that is just. It is possible to have a transition that carries people along. And I think there are companies now that are doing very, very amazing work. There's a great founder at Lacey as well, who's working on sort of training people to install charging stations. And they have this great curriculum that they've designed. And considering how, there's not really a standardized curriculum for that, because again, it's such a new market, I think this is amazing. We need more people really creating creative solutions, pardon the tautology, for achieving these goals. But in order to do it, we need to put it at the front of mind. So that's really important.
Anurag, did you have any comments on that thread right there? Because I have a couple questions I want to follow up with them on that.
For school, I guess learning from Fola, I guess it's nice. Private schools are cool for sure. Like we get interns from wherever we can, right? Who are very excited about working with us, and then they just prove out. So getting all people we need. I studied back in India, my bachelor's as well. It was a school called Birla Institute of Technology in Masra. Mechanical engineering was pretty good there, so enjoyed that. And then went to Michigan Tech for my grad school. Mechanical engineering, so it's college out of nowhere, but popular for mechanical engineering. That's what I knew before I got in. There was no application fee, so it was very cool to apply there. And then they gave me an admit like much sooner. Like when I was ramping up my applications in December, before that I had admin from that school. I was like, okay, it's easy. But yeah, I think my experience was great there. Being a small school, I had access to way more opportunities. Like if you were like looking for them, you'll find them much easily as compared to probably a big school like Stanford. Yeah, and then came to Valley twice or thrice, just getting scholarships from entrepreneurs, previous entrepreneurs. There were 2 billionaire entrepreneurs from my college, alumni. They used to fund that. To directly answer your question towards education, I don't know university directly themselves have a direct role. It's more like common people need to know like how to move towards energy economy. Simple point about fast charging of cars, right? General perception, even for common people, maybe some university graduates as well, will be that fast charging is bad for batteries. That's factually true. I know that's not always true. It's bad when you're charging the batteries from 0 to 100 and like pushing the fast charge at the edges, right? That is when plating starts to happen. But if you were like fast charging 10 minutes, cycling the very fast charging only 10-minute sessions, then batteries will be pretty happy because they don't hit the diffusion limits. So it's slightly technical again, but it's just we have to put everything into folklore so that everybody learn as compared to university themselves.
Yeah, I mean, there's just so many things that, obviously, I've been doing this for about a year now, this podcast, and every technology that I hear of, like, I never, ever heard of these things growing up, right? I was a bit sheltered. I lived in the middle of nowhere in Wisconsin, but I still think that there's a lot of people in the same boat that did not hear about these things and are not aware. So I'm curious, I guess maybe just a comment quick is, you look at the climate tech, a lot of people call it the transition, right? The energy transition. And there's a lot of people up in arms about it saying it's taking jobs. But you look at history, especially even just in America, technology disruption has always happened. And I don't think any industry, any technology disruption that's ever happened has been as gentle and conscious of the fact that we are displacing some jobs, right? Normally it just comes in, it rips things apart, changes it a lot, and then it goes, to a different kind of lifestyle. So I think that should be pointed out, that there is a lot being done. Like, I know with a lot of people I've talked to in offshore wind, there is so much being done to help get workers ready to be able to build these wind farms off the coast and everything. So just want to comment on that for anybody listening. But I did want to talk about, you guys talked about the interns that you bring and people who are interested. Could you maybe talk about ways that you see potentially we can help young people identify these types of roles? Because there are so many interesting technologies that are just not thought of, right? Not just different roles that are not thought of, not even aware, right? They don't know that these things exist. How are you guys doing this? You talked a little bit about it already, but how can other companies as well encourage this to get more people interested in a certain path prior to going into university, rather than trying to figure it out once they're in university?
It's a very, very interesting question. And I just want to respond to something you said, was that, yeah, there's totally, a way that traditional institutions that we have now can do better. I mean, I think a lot of schools currently, I didn't school in the US prior to, grad school, so I'm not sure, but I believe there is like sometimes you have like a literature requirement you have to fulfill, or this requirement or that requirement, some English requirements, whatever. So why not add perhaps some sustainability requirement of some sort, if that is helpful? And I think that's a conversation that some universities are starting to have. I think Stanford's considering doing that from next year, if they haven't already started this year, actually. So it's, again, thinking about what is the most efficient way to get this into the consciousness of people. You don't have to get too deep into it, but just as important as it is to learn about anything that's relevant or consequential or significant to your generation of the human race or human lifestyle, this is one of those things. Why aren't we teaching it, formally? But to your question about how companies like ours can do more, that's a hard one because there's no one size fits all. And I don't know what the right answer is. Intentionality, though, would be important to getting to that right answer. And I think it's also I think one thing that I can say companies can and should be doing better is diversifying the pipeline from which they let people in. So if, be it getting folks from like very many different schools, not just the Ivies, taking folks from state schools, community colleges, building that sort of hiring pipeline into HBCUs, those are also very important. And that also enables wider sort of, learning, I guess, wider teaching for more people from very many different backgrounds on these topics.
Not much to add there.
Nothing to add. Yeah, I think, no, I think that's right. I think that's very interesting. This is something I can't speak to a lot. I was homeschooled and I did not go to university, so I don't have direct experience in these things, but I did come from this very, non-traditional education background. And I sometimes think about the fact that with many of these jobs, it seems as though there's some base level skills required to get into them. But after that, a lot of it can be learned on the job.
Mm-hmm.
And I sometimes wonder, it goes to the question of incentives, right? We talked kind of about this with a little bit with regulatory issues, right? What's the incentive of a government? Like, no entity is really created to get smaller. The same thing with universities, right? They're going to try to keep people in school as long as possible, ideally. But in reality, then we should ask ourselves, like, how much education is actually required for people to have successful lives and to really contribute to this change, right? And this is something I'm not really friends with many people in academia, but I'd be very keen to speak with them at some point about what can be done to make this a shorter period and help people figure out their path sooner, rather than spending 4 years and then realizing, hey, I need to go back for something totally different that is in the area I want to focus on.
Yeah, that's not ideal. I don't have the answer. I've been academic. I don't have the answer either.
Yeah. Do you guys do a lot of, I guess, partnering with school to try to help influence the curriculum? Because this is something I think about with you talked a little about earlier about integration, right? So how there's so many different technologies being developed, and now as they get developed, they kind of get integrated. And obviously just the rate of innovation is changing the kind of roles. Do you know if, I'm assuming my hunch would be that Stanford is doing this incubator partially to keep aware of what's happening in the kind of technology space to add curriculum. But are you aware of any other things that universities are doing, or in your mind, do you have any suggestions that you think would make sense for them to do to stay on top of that next wave of technology and make sure they're educating people?
I'll let AK add to this, but I think of course there is a lot of innovation outside of, say, universities, but at the same time there's a lot of research that is being done and is really at the cutting edge forefront of things. I think it would be important for universities to pay attention to their homes, right? Look inwards. There's a lot of geniuses that you have in there. Create sort of conducive environments, fund their projects, encourage them to be creative and think outside of the box. But I think more and more universities are sort of investing in specific sort of clean tech programs or sustainability programs, or having incubators, or creating sort of pools of money to fund student ideas around making clean tech solutions, or converting or translating their research, which is also very important. To answer your question around what we're doing, not much right now. We're a very young startup. So even just like getting enough time to do the work is hard. And thankfully we're raising right now, and we're looking to expand our team. So again, intentionality is there. Personally, for me, I do some volunteering, and I am very, very keen on diversifying academia and research as much as possible, diversifying STEM, because I think we're able to do science to be most impactful when we know what impact is needed. You need more seats at the table. You need more people from diverse backgrounds to sit at the table. So I'll let Anurag go now.
Yeah, great answer, Fola. It is a very tough question directly to try to answer. I think there should be intent and people to come to the space. I have seen people working in completely disparate industries and come up and say that we want to make a transition to renewable energy space, and they're just trying to find a way there. Yeah, I think the space is going to be big enough, and it's growing for everybody to find a place. I don't know certain prerequisites are required or not. Obviously, you just have to find a fit,
Yeah, I
think
that...
Can I just add something really quickly? I'm so sorry for interjecting. I just wanted to say that, yes, there's so many people, and this is such a field that is, I think, for a lot of people, fueled by passion. So you find that folks who are in it love to talk about it because they're really excited about it. So if you're thinking, oh my gosh, I don't know anything, I don't know, find someone, shoot them an email. You see an article, you find their name, Google them, just randomly LinkedIn message them. If folks are like me, I love talking about this stuff. I will, for free. You're doing me a favor. I get to talk to you. You get to listen to me. Thank you. So yeah, I think reach out to people for sure, because this is the challenge is something that's close to the hearts of many who go into this space. And so they're very happy. And I think this is a general culture within the community. It's very collaborative. Even folks who are, someone from a competing company, you're sharing ideas. Everyone's just talking to each other. Because again, it's very new. So which is another thing I really love about the space, the sense of collaboration. It's amazing.
Yeah, I definitely have noticed that with the space. It seems as though the kind of hard-edged business kind of personalities where it's very, very cutthroat, it's a little bit less so in this space, because we obviously have a broader mission, right, which is solving the climate crisis. So I've noticed that. And for sure, everybody I've ever reached out to, again, I was a total noob to this stuff. They've always been very helpful and totally willing to chat with me. So I would second that advice. Maybe a more specific, direct question. If somebody wanted, like somebody listening right now is deciding on university, or they're in university, and they wanted to work for ElectricFish or something, a company like yours, what would you recommend some of their kind of like the potential routes or degrees that they would kind of pursue?
That's a very interesting question. And we've had folks from so many different backgrounds. We're at an early stage now, so of course we're very focused on more engineering and developing product. But I think we've had folks come work with us. We had a fantastic intern give a presentation earlier today. He helped us figure out stuff from just our social media and doing analytics, like who's engaging with our posts, to he helped us start an Instagram page because we're also really new to social media. He did some work on helping us prepare some due diligence documents. And so I think, first of all, the most important thing is a shared passion, like really being in tune with the vision that we're trying to build out. That's the most important thing for any member of the team. But it beyond the degree that you have, I think it's more so the experience and energy that you bring to the team. How willing are you to solve this problem? You can learn how to, I don't know, run some model. There's a lot of stuff on online right now, but what do you know about the problem? How energized are you to find the solution and stick with finding a solution, no matter how hard it is? And that comes from a place that goes way deeper. And so I don't know. It's very hard to say. AK,
Yeah.
do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, but you started right in the beginning, early stage company. We are just people who we need, right? Like right now in this stage. So I could try to quantify a little bit. We have got a data science arm, so we are looking for data scientists, somebody who can collect the data, crunch the data, have some insights. Obviously, innovative people a little bit, like thinking out of the box and pulling stuff out of nowhere, a little bit of magic into a product development. And then obviously supply chain people. We're building so many units. Like we have got 2 interns already, they're amazing. And like actually full-time people, right? Build our quality product, user, UX, UI,
Yeah.
just making it very seamless for people. So design a little bit. We found a design firm to just figure out how exactly should be fitting at a gas station, So there are different aspects of it, but these are the very critical roles which are looking for.
Yeah. And I think so far from the hiring we've done, I don't know that we've paid that much attention to where they went to school as opposed to what they've done. So it's more so, what projects have you worked on? What proficiency do you have? Some demonstration of your energy. And then we have a conversation with you, and it's like, how interested are you in really solving this problem, or getting into this space? And so again, it's more so experience than name school.
For sure. And as long as we're talking about the people who are looking for it, let me take this opportunity to ask. For one of the very important metrics of what the team which we're trying to build is just like trying to make a workplace which is like super diverse, everybody's accepted. We're trying to like find people who don't seem like the fit, and we fit them like with us, right? Because we are very proud of the team which we have built so far. Very diverse, like accepting, and we want to keep that up towards our team building. And so whoever comes to work for us will find that here, right? And yeah, it's an ad for the company.
No, definitely feel free. It's any plugs are totally allowed. But no, I think this is interesting. I mean, that's actually an interesting point, is that there has been, as a recruiter, obviously in the renewable space, there's a lot of energy companies that have very, very little diversity, if any, especially in their leadership board. So I think that this is interesting. I've done a lot of learning about this in the past couple of months too, is just the importance of the diversity of thought, because every different perspective can bring a very different, ability and set of eyes on a problem, right. So that's interesting, and I think that's it's interesting to see that there's no like maybe specific set of kind of degrees or anything. It's just going to be, there's lots of different roles in the space, right? There's data, this is an energy charging company, right? You'd think it might be just like engineers, mechanical and electrical engineers, but in reality, it sounds like there's all kinds of different roles within the company. So that's very interesting to see. So, and very encouraging, hopefully, for a lot of people listening. I guess maybe kind of shifting towards kind of wrapping things up here. What, from both of you, I'd love to hear, what do you see as some of the large gaps? Again, this doesn't have to be specifically in the charging infrastructure space. It can be anything in climate tech. When you look forward, based off of your current knowledge of the technical problems you're solving, what are some of the biggest gaps you see that need to be solved or that are being solved that you're very excited for, that will take up a big amount of tension in the coming years?
I'll let AK go. I know what my answer is.
If you do go on Fola, I had to think about it, definitely.
Okay. For me, the one biggest thing I'm super excited about, I think, is solid state batteries, like lithium metal. It would be so interesting to see if that really takes off, if we figure out that chemistry. Because for one, we're gonna be able to charge a lot more cars very quickly. We're going to be able to store a lot of energy because of the high energy density just within a small sort of mass or volume. We're going to have, so again, and that would then enable us solve sort of electrifying medium heavy duty sort of transportation. Did I mention the safety aspect or the safety concerns around ultra fast charging would then go away. And considering just the large chunk of emissions that transportation contributes to global warming, and how hard it is to figure out electrifying sort of the heavy duty transportation, trucking and shipping, that would be a game changer. I'm really excited for that.
Definitely half of my answer. So yeah, like I'm just a battery enthusiast, right? Towards tech, that's like try to work on different technologies. So towards I would not first fair disclaimer. I think we are at parity. What we need to go for a mass scale adoption. That's like a given. After that, I'm talking about where exactly we need to go from here, right? The recyclability of battery is very of a point which we need to solve. Definitely how we build in like just cycle them. I think it's like better materials, right? It's exciting how much they can actually extract. But also trying to use minerals and materials which are more plentifully available. So like building slight different chemistries, a little bit towards sodium, but even more abundant maybe. So just like something which doesn't use a lot of rare earth materials, so some chemistry, which will be difficult. I'm just talking possible stuff a little bit here. And then obviously safety is in sight, right? Solid state. Solid state batteries are going to be much safer because they don't use flammable electrolyte. They won't burn like this. So that's something there which Paul already mentioned. Yeah, and towards just integration more technologies, like something which is accessible just needs more work, right? Even the system which we are building, inverters we are building, it's a completely ground-up design, right? Our product, it was like, even if there are competitors in the space, they don't have the exact product which you built, the integration of putting energy back to the grid, using DC to store power, and then use this DC conversion to power. Like we can definitely work more and more on it, make it much more efficient, right? Even like technology is pretty great. I mean, just putting system stack together, I think 92 to 95% is, which we think is like our efficiency if you just remove cooling, ambient cooling from there. But yeah, you have to like benchmark stuff. So yeah, sort of long-worded answer.
No, I think that's interesting. I've thought a lot about recently the battery technology and again, not knowing anything about the actual engineering side of things, how they would create potentially other solutions. I think it was brought up on a podcast I listened to the other day about the original color TV, right? There was a certain, I don't remember the specific mineral or resource used, but they were claiming at the time, oh, we're going to run out of this because there's only so much of it, right? But then before you know it, we switched to a totally different technology, right? And we still have color TV. So like people think very minuscule, like on the exact, well, what do we have now? Forgetting about what will happen, like what are the new innovations and the problems we'll solve in the future. So that's interesting to see your perspective on. So I guess maybe just a couple final things here. What would you offer to entrepreneurs in the space right now, really wanting to just do something? They're not quite sure what exactly to do. Where would you start? Where would you have them start? What would your advice be to aspiring climate tech entrepreneurs?
For me, it would be, I think, be curious. It's first step is just be curious. It's hard to find what problem is out there that exists that is interesting to solve that I can solve. That's a lot of intersections, but without curiosity, you're not going to find it. And it's important. It's not just about solving a problem for the sake of solving a problem. It also has to be something you have passion for, because that's what's going to keep you going when it gets really hard, because it is hard. And so be curious, talk to a lot of people. That always helps. Talk to so many people. You'd be surprised at how far this idea has gone from where it started to where it is now, just based off just different people from all over the world that we've talked to, from very different backgrounds. You never know how someone's done something completely different can be used as a proxy, or just, turns on that light bulb for you. So talk to a lot of people, but it's most importantly, be curious and stay curious.
To follow that, first I would say just thanks to all fellow entrepreneurs, right? You're solving all changes in the world, like even tiny things to big things, whatever exists is just like some entrepreneur thought of it and like fixed it. So that's I can just always thankful, right, for so many people out there. Shark Tank was a favorite show for a long time, right? But personally, for me, I started thinking about like what you're trying to solve. I think about like impact and scale, and then impact again is a very generic term, right? But how much we can just change the world. Again, change the world is such a cliche, but we really are changing the world here at ElectricFish, because we're gonna actually change the whole infrastructure the way it exists, like not today, like not in like next decades, definitely, right? So just like thinking about what exactly we can achieve from what we're trying to do, and we can just shape like futures around us. That's my definition and what motivates me, as far as I said, it definitely gets tough. Like, we know it. Like half of the times it's pretty tough. Yeah.
Only half.
Yeah, I think that's a good place to close off. I think I maybe just comment on a couple of things you guys mentioned that feel potentially comment on for people listening. If there's somebody listening who is interested in solving these problems, doesn't know where to start, and maybe is feeling a bit antsy about where they currently are in their career and everything, I think to the point of stay curious, definitely be thinking about what you can do in your own space, right? Because the reality is in climate tech, every industry has to be significantly disrupted to a large extent, because we need to change everything. Like, it's basically rebuilding our entire life to make it a circular economy. So I think that a lot of people should take heart in the fact that being an expert at, I don't know, even if you're just a janitor or you're doing mechanic work, like there's so many of these jobs that people do not recognize as the sexy climate tech job, but there's so many things that can be innovated. I've had other people on the show that started out in like he was a lineman at one point, right? And he recognized an IoT device could be developed, right? So it's like, I would encourage people on that side of things. And then to your point, Anurag, is just focusing on how you can innovate things. and how what your small job that you're doing, whatever it is, can actually change the world for the better. Even if it's just a small amount, the world doesn't change because of big things, because a lot of people doing a lot of things to try their best, right? So awesome. Well, it was a pleasure having both of you on here. Really excited to see what you guys do. Excited to see how the round of funding goes here and how you continue to grow and overcome these challenges. So thank you so much, and we'll see you guys again in the future.
Thanks for having us. This was so much fun.
Well, we hope you enjoyed today's episode and the finishing of this conversation with Fola and Anurag. I really enjoyed talking to these two. If you couldn't tell, such an incredible dynamic duo that was really, I think, able to really just achieve a lot of things, and their perspective on the world, I think, will be very helpful in the climate tech space in the US. So thank you for listening. As always, please do subscribe. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, please do leave a review. It really helps us to spread the word. Again, you can also send it across to somebody who might find it interesting. Check out their website to learn more about ElectricFish. You can join the Slack channel, a link in the description, and you can subscribe to the newsletter, which is still going out and having this daily sustainability challenge to kind of change people's mindset about living a little bit more sustainably. Again, a huge thanks as well to NextWave for making this possible. And with that, we will see you next week on the podcast, where we will be talking with Tim Barrett, founder of Gridware, about all things IoT. Really interesting conversation with Tim. I'm really excited for that one as well. So tune in next week to hear that conversation, and we'll see you then.